Okay. And all right. Oh, I got my timer. My timer. Okie dokie. In three, two, one. And welcome. It is Perilous World Radio. Well, are you living the life that you were meant to live? That's the big question. And the answer is maybe and maybe not. So if it's a maybe, then we could trace, I think, in many ways, the reasons why maybe is the answer. But if you're not quite sure that you're living the life that you were meant to live, and that's a really that's really a wide-ranging thought because many things can be meant to be, and some things are not meant to be. But I want to talk about this today because I do think that the attitudes that we develop early in life absolutely have a huge bearing. I mean, from the time that you're, a little child, um, the the direction of your life can be determined by a great many things. And one of those things, and I find this to be true of most people, is you can tell a lot about a person by either how serious they are or how lighthearted people are. And, I have to go back and talk about my dad for a moment because my dad, in spite of the fact that he had great insight, powerful insight about the human condition, that he always had this lightheartedness. And so much so that he gave himself a little nickname, little old winemaker. Now, that goes back decades to, I think it was a Manischewitz wine commercial, the little old winemaker me. And so I just, I want to like acknowledge my dad's important role as having a lightheartedness for me and for his family, even though, look, being a negative person, having a heavy attitude doesn't necessarily determine how other people are going to be, but it does have a bearing. The same as a person who has a lightheartedness. And why do we love comedy? That's an interesting question. Think what you want of Robin Williams, but he was a brilliant comedian and everything to him was funny. And I think that looking at the seriousness of the way that we live our lives, uh, and it goes to from religion to hobbies to whatever, people who are super serious, I think they carry a heavier burden than people who are able to sort of throw off the burden of the seriousness of life. And again, not that seriousness is a problem, because to be serious is super important. And to me, seriousness has to do with commitment and discipline. And I'll just say of myself, I am a person who does not give up. I don't know how many times in my life that I've actually really given up. Now, there's a time to give up. Don't get me wrong. If you're, the word repentance means to turn around. So if you're going down the wrong path, if you're doing something that you feel is kind of wearing you out or going against the grain, I don't know how many ways you could put it, but if you're involved in doing something that is causing you a great deal of anxiety or difficulty, sometimes there's a moment where you just go, you know what, this isn't working. And you have to walk away from it. So I'm not saying not to be serious, because to be serious has a lot of different, it's like a diamond. It's got a lot of different facets to it. That's right. And Eyes to See on the chat says, my dad used to say things like merry eyes twinkling. My dad, he used to say these little things to try to lighten what he knew, he perceived that people were dealing with and struggling with. So I do think that what you have to do in order to move forward is to be aware of those things that are holding you back. And I call that the bag of bricks. Now, and if you take an idea such as a bag of bricks, and that each one of those bricks has something written on it that you've somehow put in your bag. So if you really need what it is that's in that bag of bricks, you keep it. But what if you don't need much, if not most, of what you've deposited in your bag of bricks that you drag around with you? The heaviness of it, the serious nature of the weight of those bricks. With let's say each brick in your bag of bricks has a word or an idea on it that you think is so important. But what if it isn't? What if it's actually an outdated idea, belief, thought, something that you've carried with you your whole life? And truly, it has never actually benefited you. Although you think, who would I be without this? Yeah, that's a serious issue in and of itself. But I think that one of the ideas would be like, we're coming up on spring. What if you were to do a clean out, a spring cleaning of those bricks that are in your bag? And if you just started questioning, as you become aware and as in a meditative state, it's easier to know. Because I remember the first time I detected a thought that I didn't need. And I was sitting in this room, I think I'm 23, 24 years old, editing one of my dad's lectures. And all of a sudden I heard this word, Kleenex. It was like, what? Where? Why? Why was that word in my head all of a sudden? I didn't need a Kleenex. And it bothered me because I realized that wasn't a thought that was mine. It wasn't me thinking I need a Kleenex. It was like the word Kleenex just popped into my head. So I stopped what I was doing. And in this little room, it was probably, I don't know, 6 feet wide by 10 feet long, full of boxes, like a little storage room that they'd set up a recording, reel-to-reel recorder in there. And I was editing these programs. And I started looking around, and sure enough, and this is the weird part, a little ways from where I was, a couple feet away from where I was editing, there was a space between some boxes, and on a desktop behind these boxes, there was a box of Kleenex. And I identified that my brain picked that out. And I couldn't even see the whole box. I could only see a little sliver of it, but I knew what it was. And I realized that was the first time that I'd ever realized a thought that sort of grabbed hold of me that wasn't mine. And that's when my journey actually really began, is becoming aware of the thoughts that were there that were produced by the environment. It was something outside of me. It wasn't something I needed, but my brain picked up on. I called it the hungry brain syndrome. Okay, because your brain gets hungry too. And so the hungry brain syndrome is something we all have. Now, the hungry brain syndrome is fed by social media and television, fear and worry or distraction and sensuality, whatever it may be. There's a it's like a brain spaghetti factory that just is a conveyor belt of things that are being fed to you all day long, every day, even when you go to sleep. So that it's a side effect. They used to call it Memorex, right? Is it real or Memorex? There's a side effect of the brain seeing and experiencing and thinking about things all day long, and it repeats when you close your eyes. Shouldn't be that way. All right, so we'll continue this conversation. FAQ.com is where you find out more about the Be Still and No exercise. My dad renamed it Antidote for All. You can also find that, and I'll be right back. And welcome back. This is a great comment from Kim. No, it's Open Eyes 3. And also, I don't know what Kim is referring to, but Open Eyes 3 said, get rid of Bob, bag of bricks. Yeah, you got to get rid of Bob, bag of bricks. And especially if those bricks don't serve any value. I mean, there's things you don't want to get rid of. There's things that you need to retain. And then there are things that you need to dump and drop like a brick. And have you ever had that experience where you have this realization where you go, where does that come from? I don't need that. And you sort of rebuke it, like in the name of Jesus, go away. And never come back like the Gollum did in The Lord of the Rings. You don't need much of what that's circulating around in that memory vault of yours. So I ran across this amazing, it was part of a lecture by a philosopher named Alan Watts. Sometimes very, very close to the absolute truth. And I got a clip here I got several clips that I'll play, and I'm finding Carl Jung is very close to what my dad was teaching, sometimes Alan Watts also. But he was talking in this one particular series about what matters. What matters? And here comes this clip.
You know, it's a curious thing that human beings seem to take everything so terribly seriously. We rise in the morning as though the universe itself were waiting for our report, as if some celestial office requires us to fill out forms of purpose and progress. We have this overwhelming sense that what we do matters, that each gesture, each decision must ripple through eternity in exactly the right way. Yet if you step back for a moment, if you zoom out beyond the daily scramble of appointments and ambitions, you begin to see a rather comic picture. The galaxies swirl for billions of years, stars are born and die, whole civilizations come and go like flickering candles, and here we are. It's as though the universe were engaged in the grandest of dramas, and we're playing our parts with such grim conviction that we've forgotten it's a play. This is what I call the great pretending. The cosmic game in which each of us, for reasons quite mysterious, chooses to act as if things truly matter. We fight, we strive, we suffer, and we love. And underneath it all lies an unspoken assumption that there's something to win, something to lose, some scoreboard in the sky, keeping tally of our importance. But look a little closer. What exactly does it mean for something to matter?
Oh, love that. And again, there is something to win, there is something to lose, but not in the sort of construct that we imagine. It's not what we think it is. And I often say to my wife, nothing is what it appears to be. Nothing. Nothing in this human world is exactly what it offers you to believe into. So it's very interesting. And, he's making a point about the giant scoreboard. I mean, how many people, this is why we love games, by the way. We love to see winners and losers. We like to pick them. And we like to think of ourselves as a winner. And if we think of ourselves as a loser, that's not a good thing. But it could be a realization of a need for change. And that realization could really literally save your life or change the direction of your life. Or let me just give you a different example. You got to be discerning. And so a friend of mine who has been deceased now for a few years, a very good family friend, was in the movie business, and he was working on a movie with Michael Douglas called The Jewel of the Nile. It was a series of movies. So they're out at a location, and my friend was a storyboard artist, and they were sketching out the scenes for what was going to be filmed. And these three cinematographer types came, and they were going to take off in their little 4-seater aircraft and go scout locations. And they asked him to come with them. And my friend said, something just didn't feel right. So he said, I'm going to stay here with Michael Douglas. We're going to continue working. So the aircraft took off and crashed. So had he not somehow been obedient to whatever it was that warned him not to go with those people, he wouldn't have lasted until he was, I think, in his late 80s. A wonderful man, a wonderful family. His children are friends of my family. They're almost like an extended family. And so the dad lasted for many, many more years after that. But see, one choice can change everything. You see it? And I'll give you another example. My wife's mother had a friend who was in a car accident. Now, what happened was that the tire blew out on the car, but the husband who was driving way overreacted. So it wasn't even what happened. It was the extreme overreaction that caused the car to flip and roll over and roll over. And I think he was thrown from the car and killed, and she was maimed for life. So one thing that you either do or fail to do somehow can be a key to a new tomorrow, right? Repent and be saved, Jesus said. So repentance, in that moment of humility and remorse, you don't even know what you're setting in motion. Just like a moment of willful ignorance. You don't know what you're setting in motion. You have no idea. You can't. Because you can't see the future. But opportunity, what does it do? Opportunity just knocks. And it's up to you to open that door. Knock, and the door will be opened. Ask, and you shall receive. Look, you will find. And that's what my dad was trying to impart to people his whole life. FHU.com, you will find out more than you ever even bargained for. We have a premium side of the website where there are tens of thousands of hours of programs. And check out the Be Still and Know exercise at FHU.com. All right, welcome back. I'm going to play more Alan Watts because he's making such great points, and he's asking what really matters.
To whom must it matter? Does the sun care whether you succeeded in business today? Do the tides pause in sympathy when your heart is broken? No. The cosmos rolls on, magnificent and indifferent. And perhaps it's not cruelty, it may be mercy. For if the universe insisted on taking our concerns as seriously as we do, it would go mad within a moment. You see, we live within layers of seriousness. Society teaches us from childhood that the responsible person is one who worries properly. You must plan your future, choose your career, find your meaning, defend your opinions. To act otherwise, to live lightly, is branded as careless, even immoral. You must take life seriously, they say. But I ask you, why? Who decreed that seriousness is a virtue?
I love that. And seriousness can be a virtue. Let's just put it that way. You know, if you watch any of the police shows, as I love to do, it's like one of the favorite things that I do now when I have a little downtime. I'll watch, whatever it is, live police cam or whatever it is. And the way that the police officers deal with the scum of the earth is remarkable. But part of it is training. Part of it is disposition. And when somebody has just done something completely nuts, the police, let's just say it's a car chase and the person wrecks their car. The first thing the policeman does is offers assistance to the person to make sure that they don't die. That they start to perform CPR or whatever it is that they have to do. And there's I think a genuineness that they suspend their hostilities, they suspend the aggression. Once the person is apprehended, they go into a completely different mode. And that completely different mode is one of assistance. And it's not a phoniness. It's not even what you might call a kindness, but it is a goodness. And it's part of the job. They can't have crazy aggressive officers. Those guys don't last very long. They end up creating a bigger problem in the end. And so in a way, there's so much to be learned from just watching the way that these guys, when they got to do their job, they go after the bad guy. Once they get the bad guy, they change. Their disposition turns into a new person, a different person. I'm just saying to you, the seriousness, there's this one that I was watching. I think I mentioned this before, but this guy drove his car, he drove his car to the edge of a big river, and then he thought he could escape from the police by swimming across the river, and then he almost drowned. So this officer wades out into this river, and he's bringing this guy in, and he himself swallows the river water. In other words, he put his own life at risk to bring this guy back to shore. And the guy was screaming for help, the bad guy. And you see what I'm saying? So your attitude determines so much. You don't even realize it. You don't realize how much your attitude determines your altitude and your destiny.
The child does not begin in seriousness. The child plays. The universe itself, if you look at it honestly, is playful. Stars explode in fireworks. Planets spin in effortless dance. Clouds chase each other across the sky. Life does not proceed by rulebook. It improvises. Yet we, peculiar creatures, insist on freezing this spontaneity into rigid lines. This matters, that doesn't. This is right, that is wrong. We take the flowing river of existence and try to bottle it, to label it, to grade its performance. And then, of course, we suffer. Because the moment you divide life into what matters and what does not, you create tension. You invent failure. You invent guilt. You invent the nagging voice that says you could be doing more, being better, achieving higher. And so you spend your days running faster on the wheel, chasing a seriousness that was never real to begin with.
So profound. Look, I've often said to people that I'm familiar with, you are your own worst enemy. And it's, you weren't born to do that, by the way. You weren't born to become your own nemesis, but you take on an imprint of the outside world. And guess what the outside world is? It is not your friend. It just, the world that we live in is not your friend. I'm reminded of the movie Avatar, not the one with the, the cartoon version. The Avatar movie, where they land on this planet and they have these indigenous creatures that are 10 feet, 11, 15 feet tall. So an avatar is a representation in this story. But on this planet, the military guy who is responsible for the group of people that he's talking to says everything on this planet is designed to eat you or kill you. And in a way, we live in a very, I don't know, we live in a pacified world, but at the same time, the undercurrent in this world that seems so passive and so navigable, that there is great danger in this world that we live in. And we see it all the time. You turn on the news, somebody's walking out in the street and shooting people, and there's an element of craziness that exists in this world. So my point, very simply, is that the world that you're born into, you may have parents that love you and will do anything for you. And if you do, you are so blessed. You're so fortunate. But even those parents can't protect you from, as the Bible says, the prowling lions that look to devour. They're out there spiritually. They're out there. Those forces are in people that are looking to find a way to get over on you and to have you as a meal. And you know it. And then your parents, without even realizing it, deliver you into a system, like a school system, a university system, and that university system or school system or daycare, or whatever it was that they put you in the hands of, there were agents in that matrix, agents of darkness. And that, when we talk about what matters is don't repeat the mistakes of other people. That's what matters.
Imagine instead that the whole thing, the struggle, the striving, the solemnity is part of the play. Imagine that behind the facade of importance, life is laughing softly at its own performance. What if God, or whatever you wish to call the deep intelligence of being, is not a judge sitting on high, but a musician improvising an endless melody? Wouldn't it make sense, then, that we are meant not to march, but to dance? When you begin to glimpse this, you realize that acting as if nothing matters is not nihilism, it's clarity. It's seeing that our seriousness is self-inflicted, that the meaning we chase is already present in the very act of living. To act as if nothing matters is to play wholeheartedly, knowing there's nothing ultimately at stake. So, the question arises, if you truly accepted that nothing mattered in the grand cosmic sense, how would you live? Would you collapse into despair? Or would you laugh deeply, freely at the miracle of it all? For maybe the divine trick of existence is that only when you stop clinging to significance does life reveal its genuine significance.
Yeah, and I disagree with this idea that nothing matters, because I do believe that even a single thing matters. And I'm going to tell you something, you're going to think, David's fallen off the deep end. No. When I'm out walking, which I do, I try to walk as much as I can every day if possible. I don't step on the bugs anymore. I try to avoid stepping on bugs. That's a meal for some other creature, but there's a recognition that occurs to you about life, and that life is amazing. And even the creepiest, crawliest of little things have their little place. And for you to disregard that, to me, and I'm not saying to be weird about it, okay? I'm just saying that you have to be conscious that you're stepping on a thing, right? Because how would you like to be stepped on? Well, nobody wants to be stepped on. Nobody wants to be abused. Nobody wants to have another person disregard their existence. And I'm not getting weird about it. I'm just saying this is a choice that I started making a number of years ago. Well, why step on something? Why destroy it when you can just leave it alone? And this is what I think the point is, that things do matter, but not in a super serious way. You don't have to get crazy about it like the lunatic environmentalists, because they're crazy. But you don't want to be crazy with disregard either. You don't want to just be a crazy person who thinks, nothing matters. No, things do matter. Moments in time matter. And your relationship to God is formed in those in moments where you have an appreciation of little things. Little things become bigger things. And luck always favors the prepared, because there is no such thing as luck. But if you're prepared, and if you are learning how to live in the moment and appreciate the things of the moment, life goes better. FAQ.com is where you find out about the Be Still and No exercise. And stay tuned, because I'll be right back. And welcome back. Let me continue with one last clip of Alan Watts for today. I got a lot more of this because I think that he makes important points, even though he was like a different kind of cat. He was a Buddhist, I think, and he believed in reincarnation. None of that stuff works for me. Who needs it? I don't want to go through this again. If I don't have to, God, please don't let me have to go through this again. I think I've learned a few things, and hopefully that'll get me through the pearly gates.
That is the beginning of freedom. To see through the great pretending and recognize that the play was never meant to be taken so damn seriously. You know, when people hear the phrase, act as if nothing matters, they often recoil. They say, well, if nothing matters, then what's the point of anything? Wouldn't the world fall apart? But that response only shows how tightly they've clung to the idea that meaning must be manufactured, that without it, we would crumble. In truth, this clinging to seriousness is the very root of our collective anxiety. It is a kind of tension we have mistaken for morality. We think the responsible person is one who worries, one who is perpetually burdened by the gravity of life. But the trouble with that attitude is that it turns living into a form of performance anxiety. Every moment becomes an exam. You could fail.
Performance anxiety, there's a condition that ballet dancers have. And it's called dance-specific anxiety. And it's the reason why many of them end up, they're capable of performing the dance that they do, but the worry and the fear erodes their confidence. And so when they're out performing, the anxiety about failure becomes the reason for the failure. Interesting. Now, the flip side of that is you don't care about whether or not you do anything right or wrong. And that's the polar opposite, because taking care, when somebody leaves, I tell them, take care. Well, yeah, because taking care means being aware. And that rhymes, and I didn't mean it to, but it actually does. Taking care when you're at work or even in, dealing with people, to take care about how you communicate, there's a power in that. And sometimes I know that there are moments where I want to say something to somebody, and I something just sort of backs me up a little bit, and it points out to me as a knowing. Don't say it that way. There's a million different ways you can say hello to somebody, or goodbye, or good morning, or don't, or come on. There's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of nuances in the way you communicate an idea or a thought or even a word. And so there's a modifying, a moderating influence of consciousness that stops you sometimes from doing things a certain way. That's what I'm talking about. A taking care in the transmission of sentiment, right? Not overdoing it, not underdoing it, just trying to do it just right and being the best that you can, knowing that your best may fall short, but doing it anyway and stepping up. And see, this is why a lot of people are afraid of public speaking, because they're afraid that they will stumble or something won't come out the way they'd like it to. You know what I'm saying? And even when it comes to communicating with people that you know, if you just start to become aware of the tension, because familiarity breeds contempt, right? And so you may not even realize that you have this little bleed out of frustration or contempt or judgment toward people. Could be people you don't even know. And again, we get triggered by appearances, right? If somebody is attractive, that triggers a certain kind of response. If somebody's unattractive, that triggers a certain response. And this is why, a lot of these people who struggle with weight problems talk about fat shaming, and, the trans community is angry because people don't accept them for who they are or what they're doing. And so there's a right way and a wrong way to go about all of this. But in this particular hour, I'm just asking you to do one thing. Examine what really matters. What really matters? And disregard or discard that which doesn't, because you don't need it. Just discard what doesn't matter. I mean, it'll come to you. You'll be aware of it. You'll even see thoughts like, what is that thought for? I don't need that thought. That's really where it starts. And this is why Be Still and Know is so important, because to know is to connect with the source of knowing. It means to be intimate with. So if you get quiet enough, long enough, God's going to show you something. Maybe something you've waited to see your whole life. Think about it. Are you ready for that? I know I am, and I'm ready as much as I know how to be. When every day I start and I say, what are you going to show me today, God? What should I do today? How can I do whatever it is that needs to be done today? That's kind of it. And then you can be shown. But there are none so blind as those who will not see. And you can't hate those who are willfully blind. You just can't. FHU.com is where you'll find the Be Still and Know. Now, in the next hour, I got a special treat for you. Special treat coming up. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome. It is Perilous World Radio. David Masters with my wife, Allison, today. We're going to talk about how to be your authentic self. And it's one of the hardest things in the world to do because we are fighting all of the programming and the conditioning of a life lived in an environment that has told you who you can and cannot be. You have any thoughts on that, Allison?
Well, today, we're talking about finding our identity. So where do we get our identity?
That's a good question. You get it from your environment. But see, there are two blueprints for every human life. One that is the real you and one that is the not you. And the not you has been installed like software in a computer into you to cause you to become the person that you've been your whole life. And this is probably why life isn't working out the way you think it should, because you're not being true to your true self.
So what would you say to your audience for using yourself as an example?
Well,
what do you feel you've seen conditioning that has made you not be your true self?
All right. Well, everybody grows up as a product of their environment. Everybody has, and it doesn't matter where you live in the world, if you're in North Korea or Germany or Mexico or America, it doesn't matter, because your environment gives you a set of ideas and beliefs, a belief system that you adopt and you are programmed by. You go to school, you say the Pledge of Allegiance, at least I did when I was a kid. And you are told, how to be and who to be and what not to be. And that's the first part of your life. But the thing is that what happens is that as you grow, there is potentially an awakening that you have where you feel that you're not in sync with something. And that something is an original self that you are meant to be at some point in time. And that is when it starts to wake up.
What's interesting is little children, they copy. We're kind of, as children, we learn and copy, and then you grow up doing what you see.
Yeah, your brain has mirror neurons, and that's how you learn how to speak the language. Now, you speak two languages, which I think is mind-boggling, but your mirror neurons help you to learn and reflect. Remember, the mirror part of it is important. And you reflect the environment that you're in, and that's how your personality forms. And it, culturally, and the things that you're taught about God, or, if you're in a leftist family, about the fact that there is no God. It depends upon, how you're, I guess it's the luck of the draw. And, I remember when I was a kid, I used to wonder, why am I me? Did you ever have that?
Like you wonder, why am I me? Who am I? Do you ever ask yourself that question? Where?
I did. I was when I was a child, and I can never forget when I was waiting for the bus in 7th grade, standing there, dreading to go to school. And I thought,
why do I have to do this?
Yeah, why do I have to do this? But the other part of it is, what am I going to be when I grow up? And here's the weird part of it, because I did not like school. I heard this insight. It wasn't words, but it was a knowing that said to me, you're going to be a teacher. And I said, are you kidding? I hate school. I didn't want to be a teacher. That wasn't an original idea to me, but that's what was told to me by some greater force. Maybe my angels. I don't know. I don't know who was listening to me. I don't think it was the devil, because, the devil, you could be two kinds of teachers. You could be a teacher of what to be and a teacher of what not to be. So anyway.
I can't remember a time I feel like I heard a voice, say this is what.
You can't? You never wondered what you were going to be? Come on.
No, I kind of just fell into doing what my mom was in.
But at some point, I'm sure you, and I know you did, you got interested in being a Christian, and and God and
Right.
what was your place in
That's
the
true,
world.
because I was raised Catholic and just automatically put in a Catholic school, so I had to do that. And I know that I didn't feel.
But the idea here is this, is that there was a point in time where you were looking for your true identity. And we have two identities, one that is workable and one that will succeed, and one that is not workable and will not succeed. And so the conflict between who you're supposed to be, who you were born to be, who you're meant to be, and the person that you've become through your and conditioning from your environment, that starts to grow until you start to ask the question, well, who am I supposed to be? Who was I born to be? What is my purpose in this world? Well, and Carl Jung, an amazing philosopher, a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, but this man was a deep thinker. And I want to play some more clips. I know I've been playing clips, and I want to complete this because it's there's so much content here. But before I get there, I want to play a clip from the movie The Matrix. Now, of course, people, they roll up their eyes when I play movie clips. But, you see, it goes to this question of identity. And here comes the clip.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. Born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Yes, you do. You have to see the truth. And Jesus said this, know the truth and it shall make you free. So the question that you have to ask is, well, what is the truth? Just like Neo said, what truth? That you were born into a prison that you cannot see or smell or taste or touch, a prison for your mind. And that prison is your environment. And the reinforcement of that environment day in and day out, when you wake up every morning, the habits that you acquire, your routine, there is a prison that keeps us. And the prison, by the way, is designed to keep us from fulfilling the purpose that God brought us into this world for. And that is what the Matrix really is about. And we all have a life within the Matrix, and we have a life outside of the cultural, mental, psychological pressure matrix that's been imposed upon us. So this is what I want to talk about today. And yeah, any thoughts on that?
So what causes someone to have to even get to the point of wanting to find that? How does that person know that there's something different than what they're just robotically doing?
No, that's a great question. And it is the conflict between, you want to say it?
No, go ahead.
No, it's the conflict between the person you are meant to be. See, in other words, unless you don't believe in destiny, if you don't believe in destiny, then you're never going to actually have the question that wakes you up, which is, am I living my own life? Or is there a different life for me waiting? And so there's a conflict there. And because every time you get up in the morning, you have to face this world that you've been placed in. And, it's like The Truman Show, one of my favorite movies ever. The Truman Show is that he is purposely managed in such a way that he never realizes that his world is artificial, that it's a construct, that it's a movie and a TV set.
Right.
And
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like people, how do you get to that point? People are born into this life, into their family, however it is. Some grow up in a certain one way and somebody else in a different opposite manner. So you wake up and it just seems normal, right? It seems like, oh, this is my normal life, until you actually maybe have pain, suffering, conflict that later brings you to a questioning to yourself. What is my life? What is my purpose?
We've got to take a break. And we will continue this because I've got More clips from Carl Jung talking about the price you pay for being yourself. We'll be right back. Yes, and you must visit FHU.com and find out about the Be Still and Know exercise. I'll continue this. In 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome back. It is Perilous World Radio. Allison Masters joining me today. Allison, and you were saying in the last segment that what happens that actuates, that actually triggers the question.
Right.
It's a great question. It's a fantastic question. And, I think that everyone is born with the question, but they forget to ask it.
And I think at different points in people's lives, they come to a place, maybe, when you're younger, in the middle of your life, later in life, that you start wondering, maybe through conflict, through things of disappointments, or getting to a place of where you're just doing the same thing over and over, thinking you're living your own life. As you said with the Truman Show, he just woke up, he did the same thing every day. He thought that was a normal thing. And everyone around him was just basically playing that role. And
right, they were all actors on a stage.
Right.
And he was the only one that didn't know it. That's the key. He was the one that didn't know that he was actually playing a role in a story. And you and me and every other human being in this world is a part of, like Shakespeare said, I am the actor and the world is my stage. But if you don't realize that you have other roles that you can play, another life that's waiting for you, you can go throughout the course of your life with anxiety, worry, and fear, and dread, and never really understand it. And so what you do then is, if you don't begin to dig deeper and excavate around what that anxiety is about and try to find the root of that anxiety, you can live your whole life using drugs and food and pills and God knows what, smoking and vaping and everything else to sort of pacify yourself. Sad.
Well, I think that's what God gives us, or why we experience. I shouldn't say God gives it to us, but we experience anxiety because anxiety is sometimes something that is put there to create us to want to seek or to wake up.
Yeah, I remember when I started waking up, even before I started meditating, I remember many times where I would sit on my couch and I could feel the pull of the world and I remember the thoughts just like it was yesterday. Oh, I wonder what my friends are doing. And, I felt like I was missing out. It's called FOMO, fear of missing out.
Hold on. These are little things that come in comparison, where we trying to compare your life to somebody else, or that's a danger. Don't you agree? Don't you agree? That's where people fall into a trap.
Yeah, but the idea was that I was getting at is that I wanted to fit in. And this is the problem that most people have. They want to fit in to this world, and their friends help them to fit in. And because their friends have a tendency to slap them on the back and see them the way they want to be seen. And, all of our younger lives are about forming an identity based around what other people think. And so your peer group is very important to you, and you get a sense of who you are by what other people think of you, right?
Right.
And so for me, I remember sitting there, I was probably about 17 years old. My friends were never really up to any good, and I knew that, but there was a part of me that wanted to be involved in what they were or weren't doing, whatever it may be, skateboarding or surfing or playing ping pong or pinball machines or whatever it was. And I had the struggle because I could see the pull. I was aware of it, and I was uncomfortable, feeling like I wasn't going to be happy if I didn't get involved with what my friends were doing. And so I sat there, and I realized one day, though, as I was sitting there watching this tug of war, I realized that the anxiety that I was feeling was not my enemy.
Right.
It was my friend.
And then there's the question of what would be
the question of what would be the right thing to do, why we would be pulled and tugged. See, there's all kinds of questions that arise in the mind, but there's also the issue of the heart. So on that note, I'm going to play a clip of Carl Jung. So he's talking about the cost of being an individual. Listen to this.
The void, the terrifying space between who you were and who you're becoming. You've dismantled the false life, but the authentic life hasn't emerged yet. You're not the person you were, but you have no idea who you are. You're suspended in complete liminal space. And this space is terrifying because there is absolutely nothing to hold on to. Jung found that the void was where people experience the most intense psychological distress of the entire process. Because humans need identity the way they need oxygen. We need to know who we are. We need roles, labels, structures that tell us where we fit and what we're supposed to do. And in the void, all of that is gone. You're not the dutiful daughter anymore. You're not the successful professional. You're not the reliable friend. You're not the accommodating partner. You've shed every identity you ever wore, and there's nothing underneath yet.
God, I love that.
So see, where do people get their identity from? And how do you know you don't have your own identity? Do people ask themselves that question? Most of the time they don't. They think that they have their own identity.
No, that's a great point. However, for me, at the age of like 12 or 13 years old, I realized that I wanted to have a sense of what direction I was going to go because, there's a natural place in life where you think, what am I going to do with my life? Now, some people wait until, people have what they call delayed adulthood, where they push it away. Seemingly for you have a friend like that. Delayed adulthood, and now she's in her 60s, and she still doesn't really accept the idea of being an adult. She wants to be able to still do the things she did when she was a teenager and in her 20s. But my point is that there's a natural point, and I think that this is a God-given thing. I really do.
I have to say, my friend who I love dearly, you just nobody wants to get old. You have good times when you're young, and you remember those times, and who wants to get old? Those are fun times.
I beg to differ. I always wanted to be older than I was. I didn't like being 13, 14, 15, 16 because you were restricted from a lot of stuff.
I understand that part. But I'm saying then when you get to a point and you remember those fun times, you want to go back to that time.
I know, but see, that's not realistic. That's kind of what you call living in denial and not embracing the responsibility of becoming somebody. Look, there is a responsibility in becoming somebody, and we'll talk about that because we've got to take a quick break. And the idea is that if you resent reality, it's going to make it harder. That's the key. Resenting reality, not being able to deal with the void. We'll be right back. Yes, and if you will, just go to FHU.com to find out more about the Be Still and Know exercise. It will help you realign everything in your life in relationship to your Creator, who has a plan for you that's different than the one you have for yourself. I'll be right back. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome back. It is Perilous World Radio. Allison Masters with me, my wife, and we're talking about embracing responsibility. And I think that there are people, look, I always wanted to be older than I was when I was young. I didn't like being young. I felt that I was at a disadvantage. And it's funny because my birthday is in April. And when people would ask me how old I was when I was young, I always say I was a year older. And because I didn't want to be perceived as being, immature. And I was immature, but there was something about it that made me sort of strive to be seen as being a little bit more mature than I felt. And see, there's a self-consciousness. I guess that's what we need to talk about, that there's a certain natural place in life where you become self-conscious, but there's some self-consciousness for different reasons. Some people think they're too tall. They think their nose is too big, which was me. Their ears are too low, whatever it may be, overweight. The self-consciousness of self as opposed to a developing consciousness of self, as opposed to what we were told to be or told we can't be. There's something there. There's a higher self trying to find an opening into the current self. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And so today I'm playing some clips from Carl Jung, The Cost of Being Your True Self. I'm going to play another clip.
Just raw, unformed, terrifying potential that feels like emptiness. People in the void often described feeling like they were literally disappearing, like they were watching their personality dissolve into nothing, like they didn't know what they liked, what they wanted, what they believed, who they were attracted to, what kind of life they even wanted to build. Everything that had felt solid and certain about their identity had liquefied, and they were floating in this formless darkness with no anchor, no map, no sense of direction. But Jung insisted this void was not just normal, it was essential. You cannot become your true self by modifying your false self. You can't renovate a house built on a cracked foundation. You have to tear the whole thing down so something real can be built from the ground up. The void is the fertile darkness where your authentic self is gestating. But you can't rush gestation. You can't force what isn't ready.
Looking at it objectively, fashion and makeup and hairstyles for women is a way of modifying themselves superficially.
And that's how people feel they have their identity. They get their identity from what their, job is or what they look like or what they do, but that's not really their identity. And that's why it's important. And I believe that God has given us that to show us, our true identity comes from Christ. And that's where we have to learn to, once you understand that and you model that, and then it naturally starts progressing, because then you start seeking for answers and find what our true identity should be.
Right. But that is the whole idea of being born again.
Correct.
Jesus said, marvel not. Don't be surprised when I say you have to be reborn. So this is the new identity. And the new identity is the identity that is installed in you like software.
Like he was saying, your foundation, it's almost like it has to be completely reconstructed in that sense, what he's explaining. But in the way God explains it is born again, not being born as a baby again, but as a new person, and allowing that identity to bloom and to grow. And that's...
And the idea that today we have these raging social battles about identifying, right? Man identifying as a woman, that's insane.
This is confusion that comes from all the stuff that people are seeking in all the wrong things, though. That this is what happens, and I hate to say it, but the enemy comes to steal and destroy, and also confusion and
okay, but here's the idea, though, that
you seek all the wrong things.
So let's say you grow up in a house, and we were talking on another show about Bruce Jenner or Caitlyn Jenner. You know who I'm talking about, right? So here's a guy whose father was a soldier in the war, in World War II. Now, my way of looking at his relationship, Bruce Jenner's relationship with his father, is that Bruce tried to be a super overachiever. He was a gold medal winner, triathlon winning guy. But there was also something in him. Once he exhausted being able to win all of these different Olympic sports, there was a void. There was an emptiness. And what happened, rather than having it be filled with, let's say, a new identity based on accepting Christ, he built it around an identity of a woman. Think about that. So there was something in him that couldn't identify with being a man, And so his new identity was becoming a woman, which he's never really going to be anyway. And this is a false identity. And you know what? All of his overachievements were based on a false identity because it never actually satisfied him. He still felt something missing, right?
Right. So what do you think caused that? Why would that have happened to him?
I think that he couldn't identify with his own father. He resented his father. And by resenting his father, he never wanted to be like his father. And he gravitated more toward and look at him. He grew up the Kardashians, right? He was married to,
Right.
the Kardashian mother. And so he was surrounded by all these women. And the women were all a very close-knit group of people, very supportive of each other. But women have cat fights and they're aggressive and mean to each other. But at the same time, he wanted to be more like them, to be part of their tribe, part of their clan, because he couldn't identify with being a man any longer. And, I heard him say in an interview that it was something that was kind of growing in him. Another clip of Carl Jung, The Cost.
You have to endure not knowing who you are until who you actually are reveals itself in its own time. The pain of the void isn't dramatic or explosive. It's a quiet, relentless ache of groundlessness. You wake up and don't know how to be. You move through your day without the scripts you used to follow. You interact with people but can't play the old roles. Everything feels exhausting because you're not operating from any established identity anymore. You're improvising your own existence from moment to moment, building the plane while you're flying it. And the effort of that is unlike anything you've experienced before. Jung observed that people who couldn't tolerate the void would grab at a new identity just to fill the emptiness. They'd construct a new persona, often a spiritual one or a radically different lifestyle, just to escape the formlessness. But this was another trap. A constructed identity, even a shiny new one, is still false.
So the false identity, building it around something. I mean, and again, I remember I used to have surfing posters and surfing pictures all over my room. For whatever reason, I was into surfing. And I used to say to people, well, you are what you do. So I was a surfer. But beyond that, there was more to me than that.
So you gave yourself that label. You were a surfer. So you did everything, looked like a surfer, smelled like a surfer, did everything surfer.
Yeah, and I still feel that I like that, what do you want to call it, lifestyle. I like that lifestyle, but that's not who I am.
Right. But see, people mostly, they get their identity from the world, from things, from, copycat thing. Oh, I want to be like that person. So they copy someone that they admire or look up to. And that's not your own identity. It's basically copycat of somebody else.
So I know that you've heard the story many times, but I got to tell you that there was a turning point for me. And I do believe that it was a spiritual, angelic intervention in my life. When I was around, just before I turned 18 years old, I was I had a lot of anger from, left over from my childhood. My mom and dad started quarreling when I was about 10 years old. And there was a lot of conflict, between them. And I was the oldest of 5 kids, so I wasn't really regulated very well. And I pretty much took care of myself, between the ages of 10 and 18. But so one day I'm getting ready to go surfing and I drive up to my favorite place, which is the pier. And I'm standing there. I think I'm going to go out. And nobody was there but me. And I heard something warning me. It wasn't a voice, but it was a knowing, like, don't go surfing today. But my rebellious self, immediately the hair on the back of my neck stood up and I said, who are you to tell me what to do? So I went out surfing and sure enough, I fell off my board and I believe I almost drowned. And I'm absolutely sure because I don't even know how I washed up in the shallow water. I just have no idea. But there I laid in and I looked up into the sky and I realized it wasn't going to last very long if I wasn't careful and I didn't change. And I said to God, I don't want to live this way anymore. And I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I said, I don't want to be this. And I said, and in fact, I was so serious, I said, I'd rather be dead than go on living this way because I was just suffering. So it is suffering that brings us to this new horizon of choice, the suffering, the pain, and maybe some healthy fear of not being able to, be alive. So anyway, in 15 seconds.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Right. It's suffering that brings us to, wanting to seek and to understand who are we or question ourselves. Because that's where it starts, is asking yourself the question.
It does. But also the pain is what produces the question, right? The suffering and the pain and the anxiety around it. And so I really, I've always been grateful, even though I suffered a lot, I'm grateful that it happened to me because it changed my life. We'll take a quick break and be right back. All right. And if you go to the Foundation of Human Understanding website, FHU.com, you will find out that your pain is there for a good reason. It's there trying to guide you away from death and a bad death. The Spartans used to have a good death. So FHU.com, find out about the Be Still and Know. You will realign. And welcome back. I want to ask you a question, Allison. What's the biggest lesson you've learned from some kind of suffering that you've been through?
Well, let me see. I'd have to think about that. Like what kind of...
It doesn't matter what the suffering is, because the suffering is what produces the need for change. So the question is, having kids, you've suffered from. It's not easy raising kids. There's a challenge, it's like the hardest job that you can have to be a good parent. And yet it's the most important job you can have as a human being. If you have children, your whole life revolves around making sure your kids are okay. So, have you suffered when your own children have been? All right. I'll go on to another Carl Jung.
True individuation requires sitting in the void, in the not knowing, until your authentic self emerges on its own terms. And that emergence cannot be manufactured or accelerated, no matter how desperately you want it to be. The fourth stage Jung identified was integration, when your true self finally starts to take shape. This isn't the triumphant cinematic moment you might imagine. It's subtle, almost imperceptible at first. You start noticing preferences you didn't know you had, boundaries that feel natural instead of forced, desires that rise from genuine depth rather than from what you think you should want.
Yeah, well, we're mostly told what we should want, and that becomes we adopt that. We think it's us. We think that, the things that we think are important. That's like, look at anybody. Look at a person who is raised in North Korea. Maybe, there's a woman who was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. Her name was something Pak. And she had escaped from North Korea and brought her father with her. And she said, I didn't know what freedom was because I never experienced it. So if you've never experienced freedom, you can't know what it is to be free.
Right. That's all she ever knew. So you have to, we're born into families, and our parents, if they're good parents, will lead by example. And that's how we get our identity to begin with, because we watch, as little children, we watch our parents, how they interact, how they handle situations, and the child learns from, the parents leading by example or not example. And then you got the other side of people that go in a different direction that create, and then the sheep mentality, then you get put in a school, and then you see other kids doing, bad things, and, but they're cool, so it's so much, it's like life just goes on and then you get the sheep mentality, right? Where you're just following the herd to get along or to be popular, or to, get attention. So you're seeking attention because maybe your parents aren't giving it to you, and they're, a mess. But then you have the good parents.
Well, but I will tell you that I am quite aware that I was the experimental guinea pig of my family, the oldest of 5 kids. And my parents learned all kinds of stuff from failures with me. I mean, I'm missing a finger on my left hand because my mom was busy washing dishes and not watching me. I've learned many things about myself in terms of me being the guinea pig. And I guess I would say that I'm glad that it was me because I turned out to be the person that I am today. And, it's taken me my whole life, but I'm okay with myself at this point. I don't feel like I'm a failure. I don't feel like I have not fulfilled whatever it is, purpose that God brought me into this world for. I've had to learn because I was the person who was the most mismanaged in my family. And it's funny, as I can look at my siblings and they're decent, good people, but it's like they have much less of an excuse because they had more hands-on parenting than I did. So, part of the idea is that everybody has to learn from making mistakes. And there's no other way, in my opinion, to learn. Some mistakes are bigger than others. And then it depends on your attitude. I mean, we watch these cop shows, and a lot of these people are just so pathetic. And what it shows you is that they have never actually learned from their mistakes. They just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. There was something missing, whatever it is that's missing from those people. Hard to say what it is, but it was an unrepentant perspective, I guess.
Denial. They're just, a lot of people don't want to see the truth because it's too painful.
Oh yeah, the truth is painful, but if you want to know the truth, my dad used to say, first it will make you miserable, and then it will set you free. So if you don't want to feel the misery of seeing the truth, then most people then this is what this Carl Jung audio is saying, is a lot of people don't want to face the void. They don't want to face that in-between transition period where they're not being stimulated and they're not reacting to their environment and they're not taking their identity from their environment because they're so used to it. They're so programmed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're just, it's familiar. So it's all they know. But until they have real true suffering and they're not dependent on other outside sources, drugs or alcohol to blind them from seeing the truth, and they have to face their own reality, which unfortunately a lot of us don't ever get that opportunity. They just are addicted to things that keep them from seeing the truth because they're drugged, they're
anesthetized,
right? And so unless you're able to be free of all that, and that's when and then you do feel the pain, the suffering. But once you work through it and you find the truth, then you're free.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. Well, that's actually the end of this show, and I hope you enjoyed the special treat for today, and maybe more of my wife Allison in the coming days, months, and years. We'll be back with another show soon. Well, all righty. Is that Mr. Jones? Oh, to hear the voice from above.